Hey, Rosalyn, thank you for coming in. I mean, you do so much. You're involved in so many different groups in a senior way and tremendously transformational in all the things that you do. So really appreciate you sharing the insights with my audience.
Oh, well, thank you for the invitation for us to connect and for me to engage with your audience. I know they have many different backgrounds. I know some people are business people, some people are technologists. I know there are younger professionals, and I think they're all interested in entrepreneurial activity, investment, and technology transformation. So I thought I would sort of talk a bit about what I do in that context.
Well, you're definitely sort of like the North Star of all of these areas. You're doing so much meaningful work for decades. I mean, just really, really remarkable. So first of all, you got this marvelous career where you touch so many people in such a positive way.
Yeah.
There had to be, or what are those three magic moments in your life? And it could have been when you're 3 or 5 years old, or 10, inside, outside the family. It could have been your first job. It could be something you're in school, mentors. But what were those three things that really define who you are and where you're going?
Well, I think for me, it's probably sort of three pivotal experiences. And if I start with the first one, which I guess is, what someone might call their origin story. My mother was a Somali nomad. She literally grew up in the desert. She was Muslim. She never went to school. She taught herself how to read English by listening to BBC World Service. She met my dad, who is West Indian, and he was in the British Army. They met in 64 in Yemen, and they got married. And so we have, two very different cultures. My sister and I were born in West Germany. We were literally born in Germany. And I think that uh, being from those different cultures and living in a third country, but actually under a fourth country,
Yeah.
United Kingdom governance was, I think that's pretty a pivotal experience. And the things I really remember there was when I was very young, when I was about 7, I think, I went to school in Berlin. I went to Spandau School, which was next door to Spandau Prison, and Rudolf Hess was still alive then. So can you imagine? Yeah, and the Berlin Wall was there. And, we had all the Allied forces. We were effectively living in a militarized zone. And we had German friends, but I was driven to school by a British soldier. And at the weekends, we'd go to the American PX, and that's where I read Archie comic books, which I'm sure some of you remember. And we had ice cream and cookies, and those are the kind of things we never had before. So living there really taught me how different communities have to try and live and work together and respect each other. And I think that is a pivotal moment in my life. Also, education. One of the things that I did when I was there, I helped a British Army sergeant who wanted to get promoted, but he had to get his maths O level. And I saw also the impact of education on people's future prospects and their well-being. So I think that was probably the first milestone, which really helped me understand the perspectives of different groups, different backgrounds. I think it also gave me a sense of justice, because I could see that sometimes people weren't treated fairly and rules weren't always applied fairly. So I think that kind of, sort of seeded my desire to be a lawyer. The second milestone was really going to university. I went to study philosophy at the University of Bristol. I'm a very curious person. I like to understand how we think. And obviously, in a philosophy degree, you're taught how to think critically and how to evaluate. But you're also taught to consider things like, basically ethics, theory of justice, and you end up also learning, what does it mean to live a good life? And I think that looking back was really pivotal, because one of the things I've tried to do throughout my professional and personal life is to make sure that I'm trying to live a good life and helping others. During that period, I used to advocate for people at social security and medical appeal tribunals. And there again, it's about justice. You know, if you can't speak for yourself, if you don't understand the rules, you can be, basically seriously compromised. So I think that was a pretty pivotal experience. It encouraged me to become a lawyer, and I was lucky enough to get a training position. We called it articles in those days, with a city law firm. And that then gave me into a transition into the city. So working in finance, doing deals, and I was lucky enough to work for some very good lawyers there. So that's kind of my second milestone. My third, I would say, is the next stage of my career, when I went to work for an investment bank. It was 1997. It was when the internet was taking off, and I went to work with a global multidisciplinary change management team. The bank was quite innovative. We did, I think, one of the first technology outsourcing. People would just trade on the internet. We had the year 2000, and we had to do all that remediation. So I saw really, the nuts and bolts of how technology affects financial institutions. And then also in that firm, I had a period where I was chief of staff to the heads of the global investment bank, and there I learned how global organizations are led and managed. So I think those were probably the three things that really determined what I do today.
So let's get in mind the first part of an inflection point, in that you experience a kind of a multicultural ecosystem, right? In a pathway. Yeah. And did that make you more sensitive to this idea of diversity and inclusion and things like that, or?
Absolutely. Because I think when I learned that there was always a dominant narrative, and also that's where, usually the dominant narrative have constructed the rules, of play. And if you don't necessarily speak the language, or you may not have the education, you can become very disenfranchised, so much so that the dominant group doesn't even understand that you've become disenfranchised, because they think the rules are fair.
Yeah.
So it did sensitize me.
But I had this experience as well in terms of, the impact of education, or the access of education, and then that awoken you. What were your feelings like when you experienced that, or when you saw that?
Well, it's really positive, because I think that when people are educated, they're able to advocate for themselves. Not that they can't do so before, but they may not necessarily be doing it in the way that the people they want to advocate to understand. I also think that education opens up opportunities for people, and it also encourages inclusion, because if people are able to contribute and participate in society, then everybody's happier, and we all benefit. So I think education is really important.
So let's go back again. You have the situation where you experience different geographies, different cultures. You have experiences with the people with different access to education. And when you were young, were you interested in, like, what kind of courses were you interested in? What were the subjects that kind of excited you when you were younger?
Well, they still excite me. I mean, I've always like ideas and philosophies, history. I'm interested in abstract, very much strategy. I love strategy. I love thinking about mental maps and how the different lenses by which we perceive the world. I love art and creative expression, and I love music as well.
So when you were very young, then you took courses in those areas, and you experienced each one of those areas, even when you were like, let's say, a teenager.
Well, I was a great reader. Back in the day, we had the fabulous, free library service. I spent my whole life in the library reading books. And because, I think you were similar, because I remember hearing, like when we last spoke, you talked about, reading encyclopedias. I mean, I did that too. I think that it was really, for me, it was reading books that opened my mind to all the different possibilities that the world has to offer.
So on the creative side, were you sort of dabbling in art and in music and things like that while you were a teenager?
I'm really bad at actually. I'm somebody who appreciates art, and I'm somebody who appreciates music, and but I play the piano, but not very well.
And then, so it sounds like then when you're in your younger grades, right? So before you go to university or into the college system, you took social sciences, you maybe took a mix of courses and things like that. And the ones that interested you were more like the history areas and so on, like, or was it kind of like a balance of everything?
I think I was interested in science up to a certain point. Unfortunately, in the UK, you have to specialize quite early. And I went down the arts route, so the history, the philosophy, law, the humanities.
And then that would then guide you to go to university. Now, the university regimes are different around the world.
Yeah.
So what was the kind of the regime to try to get into university? What was that like? You had to take A levels or
You basically have to get you. I've got a daughter who's just finished hers, and it hasn't changed. You literally just have to get your head down and revise and get your exams. But once you've done that, then that gives you the opportunity to go and experience, many more things. And at university, joining lots of different societies, and I joined, lots of political societies and debating societies, and so I guess that was probably the area that my education really flourished.
So you're so in the UK, you have to write these exams that kind of qualifies you for what you can study later. That's my understanding. It's different here.
It's sort of funnel. I mean, I think I think in other parts of the world, you can keep more options open for longer. And I actually think that's a good thing, because I think many people in British universities find that they've picked the wrong subject for them. And then that's, a bit of a problem. Whereas actually, if they were able to keep, a range of subjects, I think that would enable them to perhaps make better choices for themselves.
So when you were in university, then you took courses in the humanities. You took courses in so in Canada, to get a law degree, you typically you can get a degree in economics or in commerce or something, and then you go to law school.
That's what I did. Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah.
So your first years prior to law school was a more generalized humanities, arts kind of education?
No, I think I had, a single honours philosophy degree at university, got that. And then I did what we call the conversion course, which is what you basically were describing. And that's a 2-year course. So the first year it's the core subjects of law. So it would be contract law, it would be land law, it will be equity, those kind of subjects, the really core subjects. And then the second year is more applied law. And so that's what I did. And that's how I qualified as a British solicitor.
I see. So you actually studied philosophy. So your major was philosophy?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
I always had this impression that the two hardest areas to study in university would be mathematics or philosophy.
Yeah, and the worst is mathematics and philosophy. I could never have done that. Yeah, yeah, it was pretty hard.
So you got your undergrad degree in philosophy,
Yes,
and then you specialized and you did this first year of generalized law, sort of the
yes,
equivalent of law school, and then you
yes,
kind of specialize in law in the second
yes,
year.
yes.
And then after that, I'm sure you have to kind of sit an exam or something, and then you become a barrister, right? Or how
Yeah,
does that work?
we sit exams, and then we sit exams at year 1, year 2, and then you have to get what we call articles. So 2 years of training with a law firm, and I did that with a city law firm.
Okay, so now, so you got this really interesting, diverse background, right?
Yeah,
Multicultural background,
yeah,
and it kind of sensitizes you to,
yeah,
some of the pressures and challenges of life and people and
yes,
things like that. And then that guides your interest in humanities, and then you end up doing all the required kind of exam work, and
yes,
you end up at university. You're studying philosophy, which is a really difficult area because you got to think of esoteric
yes,
concepts and write on it
yes,
and analyze it, and then you decide to apply that and
yeah.
more and go to your equivalent sort of law school where you do your general year, you specialize, and then okay, now you article to gain the experience, and
Yeah.
then you have to write some kind of bar exam, I guess, or equivalent of it.
But we do all our exams before we start our practical experience. So when you start your training, you've done all your exams,
Oh, I
and
see.
which is great. Because the articles were very busy. I mean, we worked very long hours, but you got lots and lots of practical experience, which was just brilliant.
Wow, so it's really kind of experientially based, and actually getting the exam over first is actually
Yeah,
pretty good because then you don't have to go back into the study
no,
mode
no,
afterwards.
no. And you have to use it then. And that's what you're getting paid for. Yeah.
Right. So and okay, now you're a full barrister, right? You can write.
But I'm technically a solicitor because we've got
Right.
two branches, and barristers have a different training path, and I'm what's called a solicitor.
So what's the difference between a solicitor and a barrister?
Um, well, the barristers typically are advocates, so they're in court. They're the people you see wearing the wigs. Although not all barristers go to court, there are expert barristers who issue legal opinions, but in the main, they're advocates. Solicitors are people. Are lawyers who advise either people or businesses, and they can do transactions on the corporate side. They can advise on employment law. They can advise on criminal law. They're the people who are very much in applying the law. Barristers are looking after your rights in court.
Okay, so now you've done all of your articling, and then your first job is, so let's kind of mine your career path. So your
Yeah.
first job was with the city, you indicated, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
so what was that job? What was your responsibility for the city?
Okay, so I worked for a city law firm. I was a trainee solicitor, and we have a method of learning where you sit in the room and you listen to the senior person that you're working with. You work with them. They might ask you to do research of points of law. You might be asked to draft documents. And to give some examples, the kind of really interesting questions I looked at. In those days, I remember there was a bank that was looking at developing electronic money, and some of the research that I had to do would be, well, what laws applied, what would they have to put in their terms of business, what legal risks would they have to manage. So that, I often was given quite, I would say, abstract questions, which obviously philosophy was, very helpful for. Because what you're doing with questions like that, where they haven't been asked before, is you're taking principles of law or statutes or common law, and you're applying precedent, and you're trying to understand how the existing law might be applied to a very novel situation. And that is something, as you can imagine, is on steroids today with the level of technology change that we have. We also did things like advise on syndicated bank loans. I remember working on deals where big corporations were being financed by, maybe 13 to 15 banks. And that's a transaction because you have to make sure that everyone understands what the terms are, everyone's signed up to it, and everyone does what they need to do. So there's a lot of project management in law as well. We also did mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling companies, listed companies. Many of the deals that we did were in the papers. So as a young lawyer, that was a very exciting time for me.
So really a practice of corporate law that in terms of banking, merger acquisitions, things like that. So you get a great idea of the financial marketplaces. And so that was your first job. And then what caused you to say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. And what was that different? What was that second position?
Well, I think the second position was really an evolution of the first. So the first, obviously, I was a lawyer, doing the things that we've described. And then the second was actually working for an investment bank, which is is another agent in a financial market. And for me, working for the investment bank was very exciting because it was at the time that banks were starting to use the internet and finance was becoming very global. So in my next job, I did a lot of travel. I went to 11 European countries. I went to the States a lot. I went to Israel. And so that was basically taking the principles that I'd learned earlier in my career and working with actually, financial participants.
So a lot of people don't understand what an investment bank is because they'll hear the term venture capital, private equity, family offices. They'll hear about things like family seed rounds, and then there's investment bankers, there's hedge funds. I mean, how do you make sense of all of this if you're out there and you're not in the investment marketplace? So first of all, what is investment banking? What does that look like?
Okay, so and it's funny, good point that you make, because a lot of these activities have evolved as marketplaces have evolved. But typically, at its core, an investment bank would be a place where companies could raise money. So you could either issue equity if you were a listed company, or you could issue bonds, and they would sell your equity or your bonds. We would often say that the investment bank is what we call the sell side. So, if you were a company and needed to raise finance, the investment bank would be acting on your behalf, saying, buy these shares to institutional investors or these bonds. Investment banks would also have departments who write research on these companies so that when investors are deciding, which companies they're going to buy or sell, they'd be looking at the investment bank's research. So that's what I would call the practice of an investment bank. There's another area called corporate finance or merchant banking, and that would be the area of the investment bank that would do the mergers and acquisitions, buying or selling companies. Sometimes that could be what we would call a hostile takeover. So those companies may not want to be bought. And they are what we would call corporate finance advisory. It's a different activity. It's to do with valuing businesses and giving advice to corporates. So I really divide the investment bank into two: corporate finance advisory, capital markets practice. And capital markets, you would then divide again into equities and debt. That's probably the easiest way. It's a very cool function. When we talk about hedge funds and private equity, Now, I think the first hedge fund was actually created in 1949 by Alfred Winslow, the nerdy thing I happen to know. And that was a private partnership. And hedge funds are not for what we would call retail investors. They were sophisticated investors who could decide to take long positions, or what we would call short sell, which I'll explain in a moment. In essence, slightly more sophisticated techniques for private partners. Private equity was always about helping companies. So you would raise money for these companies so that they can grow. But private equity is funded by what we would call limited partners. It's governed by a limited partnership agreement. It's a contract. And that model has developed with certain terms with regard to how people are remunerated, the private equity professionals, and also certain terms of art in terms of the agreements. So private equity is not for everyone. The time horizons are longer, the risk profile is different, but private equity developed as a real force. Two reasons. First, on the venture capital side, is with Silicon Valley, with funding of innovative companies. But private equity in the UK, when I started my practice, was really about mid-sized companies and growing. So all these different participants play different roles in the marketplace. And if you're not in that world and you're engaging with them, the best way to try and understand it is to understand what it is you're trying to do. Are you trying to raise money for a little company, big company? Are you trying to borrow money? Are you trying to sell your business? And then once you understand what activity you're doing, then that will determine who you interact with and what they do.
So you ended up working as a lawyer in investment banking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as the lawyer in investment banking, you then got familiarity with things like family offices, private capital investors, private wealth management, hedge funds, merchant banking, the whole bit. You actually got familiar with every piece of it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What's your favorite activity?
My favorite activity. I love working with family offices, I have to say. And the reason why I love that is because they're all different. And just to explain to people what a family office is, typically it might be a family business which has made a lot of money, and then they have a private investment company and they invest their money. In the main, that's what a family office is. Some are what we would call single family office, and it's one family, and some are many families. The reason why they're interesting is that just like private equity and venture capital have grown in the last 20, 30 years, family offices are now growing and becoming much more important financial players. So to give you an example, I think there was a Price Waterhouse report in 2022 called Navigating Uncertainty. And it said that a third of all startups in 2022 were funded by family offices. I mean, I bet people didn't know that. And also there was a Preqin report out around that time, which said that family offices were the third largest groups of investors in private equity after pension funds and funds of funds. So they're becoming really important players in private markets, and they're not governed by the same rules or incentives or motives. So I think it's as somebody who likes to be involved with innovation, I think working with family offices is very exciting.
So you find family offices the most fun, and family offices are typically, it could be generational, like the Rockefellers would have the DuPont. In fact, I was with some members of the DuPont family last week, or this past week. So, and they operate enterprises, they have companies, they invest, they're kind of into everything. They're like a conglomerate. I find they're like conglomerates, right? And some of them are like conglomerates.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's your favorite, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's so much fun. because also it's evolving. And so that means, and it's a very relationship driven business. So, advisors to family offices all know each other. And once you start working in the family office environment and you become trusted, it's a nice environment to be in.
So when you, because you got a legal background, when you work with the family office, I guess there's different ways you can work with family. You can, some family offices are very traditional. They invest in real estate and really kind of classical old school assets.
Yeah.
And then you have family offices that work with more modern kind of alternative assets, even venture. Some of them are doing venture meaning early stage companies, the startups, they'll get into those kinds of areas.
Yeah.
And so in your practice with family offices, are you giving them more advice about succession planning, how to sort of manage that money, or are you helping them on the investments too? I mean, what are the scope of services that you provide a family office?
Well, both. I think on the succession side, we are going for the biggest transfer of wealth there has ever been. And I know lots of people talk about that, and I think we all, in some shape or form, see some aspects of that. What I see on that is now that the younger generations are having an impact on the investment. So, many of them are really interested in having a positive impact. They're very interested in the UNDSG goals. They're interested in what their money is being used to do, and they're comfortable dealing with more early stage. So, funny enough, by advising succession, you can still find that you're advising on investment. On the investment side, there's really two concepts. There is what I call wealth preservation. So, many families don't want to lose their capital, and then there's also how do you use the wealth for the benefit of the family and for the benefit of others, and that is where, as I say, people are more willing to look at what impact their capital has, but also they're willing to be engaged. So they're willing to, if you fund a startup or a business, they're willing to open their network, share contacts, support the business. And I think it's effectively an ecosystem and continually evolving.
That's fascinating. So, Rosalyn Breedy, you're the managing director of Breedy Henderson, a UK corporate fund financial services group, right? As a lawyer.
Yeah.
And you work with family offices and you're advising them on governance. So how do you govern these things?
Yes.
Because it'd be quite complicated. Succession planning, investment structures.
Yes.
Of course, because they're investing, then you have to advise them on financial regulation and financial policy work.
Yeah.
And because family offices have younger people in them,
yes,
and these younger people are interested in environmental, social, those diversity, inclusion.
yes.
So now that becomes a bigger bucket, right? That they're interested in the social impact side of what they're doing.
Yes.
And as you indicated, there's this big transfer of wealth going from the older members to the younger members.
Yes.
And the younger members, my sense is they are more worried about the planet.
Yes.
What can we do about social responsibility? What can we do about the environment?
Yes.
What can we do to ensure there's diversity and inclusion?
Yeah.
So you're seeing this movement of family offices thinking more thoughtfully about these areas, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's also, I see another trend that's developing of an interest in some biosciences and innovation there. I mean, obviously we saw the pandemic, the development of the vaccines. People can see that application of funds into areas of biosciences makes a lot of sense. And sometimes they're driven by that because maybe someone in their family has had an illness and they have sort of personal experiences. But also, again, it comes back to the impact and the benefit of humanity.
So it's a really interesting story. You come from diverse cultures. You get sensitized into the underserved. You get an education in the humanities that leads you to philosophy, which are actually broaden your thinking, right?
Yeah.
And then you end up in law, so then you get to practically apply your broad thinking and your experiences. Then you end up in the financial services area, and investment banking, and merchant bank, all the things associated with that.
Yes.
And part of that becomes family office, which you really like. And family offices are like financial corporations, right? They have holdings, they manage money, they invest.
Yes.
But because they have family members, you have to think about, how do I govern this thing?
Yes. Yes.
The governance, the succession planning. And because society is changing, and the younger members are having a bigger decision impact within the family office, which is really a company but consisting of family members, then you have to be more sensitive to the environmental, the social, the governance, the diversity, and the inclusion aspects, and then making the investments and things maybe in the ESG space and so on. Because you're also helping the family with their advising them on their venture capital, private equity, corporate joint venture deals, right? Because there's always legal structures around all of this.
Yes.
So there's all of that work. But you also do work that's sort of affiliated with it. Can you describe that? Like, you belong to X organization that is really concerned about ESG, or you belong to Y organization that's really concerned about integrity and ethics, or you belong to this organization which is really interested in being mentors for the next group of young leaders, or you're interested in this other entity because they're really into innovation, and you want to make sure that innovation is done in a thoughtful way and helps the economic development of the region, right? Let's talk about these different other parts of who you are, Rosalyn.
Yeah, because I think sometimes people don't understand that and just think it's all a bit random, but actually they're all points. And if you think of a tapestry, they're all different elements of the tapestry. So one of the elements is I sit as a member of the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment. I sit on their Integrity and Ethics Committee. And that, I think, there's a real connection from, my days in philosophy. And it's about one of the things that we do on that committee is develop ethical dilemmas to help people test their thinking and help them to understand how they apply the financial conduct rules. And we really enjoy doing those. We have an annual conference. We call them Grey Matters. And what we do is we will, take an issue. We will turn it into a little story with characters. It will be acted out. And then we'll ask, the members of the Institute to vote on what they think the right answer is. And then we would sort of talk about that. More recently, we're finding, with the development of AI, and that's having a real impact on the ethics of financial services industry. And we've been talking about, things like copyright. Do people know that they're being advised by a bot? All of these kind of things. And how would your employees feel if their performance bonus was determined by an algorithm? And and actually, this is a really intelligent and interesting way of helping organizations engage with the issues that they are actually facing. And we find that our conference is always very well attended and very well argued by the membership. So that's something that's very important to me. And I enjoy doing that with other members of the industry who all give their time voluntarily and take it very seriously. The other thing I do is I sit on the Bristol Innovations Board, which is a subcommittee of the University of Bristol Executive Board. I cannot speak for the university, honestly, in an environment like this, but I can tell you what we do. And there's sort of two elements to that. It's all about supporting the innovation coming out of the university, of which there is just so much and in so many different ways. One strand is what I call commercialization with industry. We have something called the National Composite Centre, which is well led by Richard Oldfield, and that's about research in composite materials. And that NCC is what we call a member of the United Kingdom Catapult. The United Kingdom Catapult system is 9 areas of specialisation in the country. And in Bristol, we have our catapult is specialisation in higher value manufacturing. And what we do in the NCC is we help industry partners develop research materials. University of Bristol is working with Rolls-Royce to develop the front end of their Rolls-Royce engines. That's an example. They've done work on aeroplane wings, and the university even developed the ore for the Paralympic Olympic rower who represented our country. So it could be small things, big things, but it's all about innovation. The other side of the university is about commercializing university research. So that could be biosciences, cybersecurity. We do a lot of work in telecoms, a lot of work in quantum, and also in digital transformation and developing sort of twin worlds. And the twin worlds piece really comes from Bristol's history as a centre for creative arts and visual. So you might know Wallace and Gromit, which is a centre developed in Bristol. So that is very exciting. There are a number of universities who in the UK who are doing very exciting work. And it's a particularly exciting area because not only are the universities doing really exciting work, but actually there's been some changes in our capital markets in the UK. We're making it easier for founders to list their companies. We're making it easier for people to sell secondary positions in private companies. So there's been a lot of thought put into our capital markets. And I think we're just about to hit an exponential point of flourishing. So that's really interesting. I do a lot of work in terms of mentoring. In the past, I've been an advisor to Black Women in Asset Management. I supported Jacqueline Tyro, who set that up. And that's about getting more ethnic minority diversity in wealth management, which is something I feel very strongly about. I've also mentored many individuals, and I enjoy that too. I mean, there's only so much you can do as an individual, but very often I think that when you mentor someone, you learn as much from them as they learn from you. And I always see my job as really opening doors and trying to broaden people's perspectives. I think the thing that I really, really bring to the table, because of my diverse experiences and history, is I think I have quite a broad perspective, and that can be helpful for other people as well as me.
Yeah, we're down to our last, part of our interview. I mean, there's so much in that last series there. I mean, you're a member of the Integrity and Ethics Committee of this Chartered Institute Securities Investment. I think it's really fascinating, right? Because of the implications of integrity and ethics and everything that's tech related, and the interaction that that's going to have with society and at all levels. So it's foremost in people's minds. We're at this stage of the 10th machine age of double exponential innovation that's going to have profound impact on everybody.
Yeah.
And so it affects securities, affects the investment marketplace. So you're addressing that in some meaningful way. You're also on the innovations board, as you mentioned, a committee of the University Executive Board, and advisory to the University Executive Board. And that's really fascinating, the work you're doing there. You talked about all this innovations occurring. There's the elements of the Smart Internet Lab, right? And
Yeah.
it's a renowned information communications technology research center. And you got all these experts, 200 working on 5G and optical and networks and end-to-end design and optimization. You mentioned quantum as an area of interest outside of the lab. You got all these trailblazing projects, and so you're part of all of that. You have the National Composite Center, right? And it's Center of Excellence in composite research and open access. It's which means you share that work to world class, and you're doing things that are, models for the world, right? And because it's open access, it becomes a test bed for the world as well. So,
Yes.
and just amazing kind of work and on the innovation side, and to help startups and things like that too, as well. And then, of course, it doesn't stop there. You're helping the Black women in asset management. Asset management has been around for a long time, but typically it's not well represented with all elements of the diversity that's out there, right? So, and so you definitely need to address it, and you're addressing it as a member of this Black Women in Asset Management Advisory Council, and you have these meetings, and you're trying to help people, and then you have this constant mentoring program of professionals and try to help them mind all the gates that are there.
Yeah.
And to help them with making the right moves, and because you've done it all, and plus you won all these awards, right? Like and you've been on committees on things like 40 under 40 and Rising Star kind of things, and working in with media. It's quite remarkable what you do, I think.
You're right. Well, coming from you, I would play that back.
I mean, Chambers and Partners 2022, 2021, City Wealth Leaders List, there's Spears 500, Lady Astor I mean, it's all of these things of notices that we made, or organizations have said some wonderful things about what you do. So you really have had just an amazing impact. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Of different notable people and organizations that have awarded you or have cited you for just amazing work. Is there anything you want to add to sort of kind of my summary there?
No, I think I just do want to say that I've been lucky enough to work with some really great people, and I've had lots of opportunities given to me, and I wouldn't have got where I've got to without them as well. So I would like to just mention that.
So where do you see yourself in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years? And then what do you see yourself in the longer term, let's say 5 to 10 years, and then maybe 20 years? So 3-year bucket, 5-year bucket, 10, and then a 20-year bucket.
Okay. So in the 3-year bucket, I obviously want to continue doing what I'm doing. I think in the 5-year bucket, I would like to take more senior board positions and be more in the governance mode. I think at the moment I still want to do these things. I do want to give back. I'm a patron of the Royal Academy of Arts in London, and I contribute to the art school there. It's the only independent art school of the country, and I think in sort of 20 years' time, I'd like to be more in charitable philanthropic mode.
Have you ever considered running for Parliament, or get into?
Funny that you say that. I did actually very early on in my career. Yeah, absolutely, was quite serious about that. Yeah, I'm not averse to it actually, but I know I have a friend who's been an MP for 25 years, and I think the two-party system in our country it doesn't necessarily fit in with somebody who has broader ideas, because I believe in ideas from both parties, which is quite hard.
I mean, all the experiences you have would make you very thoughtful, and the wisdom would make you a great leader. And you're proactive in your thinking, and you're definitely very sensitive, and you have empathy, but you have the critical or thinking elements as well. I mean, it's kind of like the best of everything you have, right? It's very remarkable. Is there any, so this is the last question, any sort of overall advice or recommendations you want to leave the audience, and or questions you want to leave the audience?
Okay. I think the kind of question I would ask is, what role, are you going to play in our future? Because I feel that our society is going through such transformational change, and so quickly, that our governance models of waiting for things to happen then reacting is just not going to work. So I think we need to engage as population members to think about, well, what are the themes that are important, and how do we engage, and how do we feed back, and how do we influence? So I think that's for every single one of us. We need to think about what role we want to play in the development of our future for the benefit of ourselves and our children, our grandchildren, and the planet, basically. In terms of advice, what I think I've learned about life is it's really important to reflect, put yourselves in the shoes of the different stakeholders, and small experiments when you're making change. Take the feedback, learn from it, and don't be afraid to pivot. I think sometimes with people making change, you sometimes get people who do a very radical, this is how it is, and slightly, impervious to the impact that might have. And however clever you are, however much you know, and how much data you have, you really won't know what your impact is. So I think, sort of small steps in introducing change, taking feedback, and changing. Consultation with broad stakeholder groups, and not dismissing their perspectives. There's a tendency sometimes when you're taking information that doesn't fit with your mental model to discount it. I think that's a human trait. So I know you come from an engineering background. You have to build something that means that doesn't happen.
And your advice speaks to your background. So,
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it all resonates, right? That this is who you are.
Yeah.
And more.
Yeah, I am very positive about the future. I believe that human beings are capable of adaptation. I think if you are ever in a situation where people need help on an individual basis, people do help each other, and it's more about how to organize ourselves in a way that we can really help the planet to evolve.
It's interesting. I was reading this thing from Chambers and Partners 2021. You're described as a class act, very good with people, very supportive of startups and innovation. She thinks of options on how things could be done. She's has really interesting insight. She's a breath of fresh air. You have industry knowledge, well as legal law, a huge asset. I mean, that's you, right? And you're extremely thorough and diligent and a kind, a genuinely lovely person who I implicitly trust, understands the human side. I mean, it's also positive, right? And it speaks to you and the impact you've had on so many different people's lives in a trusted, meaningful, thoughtful, kind, and with diligence as well. And so that's why when they use the word cautious, that's the diligent side, right? Yes. You want to make sure that you're protecting the interest to the best degree. People that you work with who become your friends because you're engaged with them in so many meaningful ways. So Thank you again, Russell, for coming in and sharing your insights. I really enjoyed our conversation together. You're just an amazing individual. So,
Well, thank you, Stephen. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.